Hey there, Lux Babes, welcome back to my channel. I know it's been a while. I've had a lot going on, some of which I cannot wait to share with you guys, but for the purpose of this video, I want to talk about pros and cons of living in a studio. Now, many of you may or may not know, depending on whether you got a chance to watch any of my vlogs, I currently live in a studio, and I've kind of caught wind that you guys are really interested in my apartment related videos and my Vegas related videos. So the content this year is going to be a mixture of both, okay? If you've been considering moving to a studio lately because you're noticing just how cute a lot of the floor plans are becoming, and maybe you're getting a lot of inspo from Pinterest, but you really aren't sure whether you're ready to bite the bullet, this video might help you a little. I have been in my studio for 14 months now. This is actually my first time living in the studio, but I've done it long enough now that I feel like I feel confident telling you guys the pros and the cons. Let's get into it. All right, we're gonna start with the pros first because I'm a positive person, okay? The first thing is less to clean. I know that makes me sound hella lazy, but it's because I'm one of those people that I'd rather be spending my energy doing a lot of things. Now, if it's in your budget and you don't like cleaning anyway, getting a maid obviously is an option. So you may be thinking, I'm not really bothered about having a larger space because I would rather have a larger space and have someone come in and clean it. If that's you, that's fine. This video is not for you. But if having a maid is not in your budget, if this is your first apartment maybe, and you don't really have a lot of things, and you're just overwhelmed by the first time renters blues, the leasing process is totally understandable. Get you a place that has less square footage to worry about cleaning. The second thing that I think is a pro, and this may just be me again, is being able to see most of your apartment from your peripheral. Now, this isn't exactly true for me because I have little nooks and crannies here. When I'm in the office area at my desk, sometimes I can't see, obviously, my restroom or even my closet area. But as far as the living space, I can see the sitting area, I can see the kitchen, and I can see my bedroom. So because I live alone, that gives me a little bit of safety, right? A lot of times with safety, it's not really how safe you are, it's how safe you perceive yourself to be. So perceived safety, right? I don't know, I like being able to see what's happening in all areas of the house. All right, number three kind of ties into number one. It's less to furnish. So because you have less square footage, if you're just, again, getting your first apartment, you're a college student and you want to live off campus, or you just got out of college and this is going to be your first time living alone, but you're not really like the interior decor expert, right? It's not your strong point. You're not really trying to build that skill right now. Having a studio really puts less pressure on you to have to buy more, because I will say, as someone who has lived in a loft that was almost 2,000 square feet by myself, I know what it means to walk into your apartment and hear an echo. It was one of those setups where it was so large, I had a door in each floor. So I had two different entrances into that loft. The door upstairs was less echoey because there's carpet in the loft area up top, but there's tile at the bottom. I had a sofa, I had a TV, center table, I had the kitchen area. I had basic furniture, the bar stools, but it just was echoey because I hadn't filled it enough with a bunch. And personally, I had been a minimalist for a while and I just didn't realize it. I usually try to buy furniture and just little pieces that are multi-use, right? Which leads me into pro number four. Right? Number four is that it makes you more intentional, right? So if you're really into intentional living, if you've really been working on less consumption, living in a studio will help you with that. Whether it's because you don't have enough cabinets to store your Costco overload, right? No shade to Costco. I love Costco. My entire family uses Costco. I'm just saying that if you live alone, sometimes you're overbuying. You're buying more than you need, especially if you're not like cooking a lot, right? Whether it's just because you don't have enough space to fit as much things, right? So for example, I don't have a dresser where I live right now, and I haven't needed one, right? There's enough space in my closet that I had little cubbies where I have things like nice and organized. You start to really see furniture pieces that you've been buying just to buy because you were told to buy it. Like right now I have a coffee table, but I actually use it. I use it as a leg rest. I use it to put my food on top sometimes when I eat, when I don't feel like using the island area. It also looks good aesthetically, so it serves a bunch of purposes, right? But say for example that I absolutely had to have like a coffee sitting area or a dining area, right? That would be a problem for me in this space because there's a way to put it, but it's not functional, right? And if it's been ingrained in my mind, a lady's home should have a dining table, this wouldn't work out because I don't exactly need it or want it. I was recently considering moving, and I'll make a whole nother video about that. And that was one of the challenges I was having. I wanted a larger space, but not a larger sitting area. I like the sitting area and the kitchen to be very intimate still. I like a lot of my space to be placed in the bedroom and the restroom. Don't ask me why. Anyway, to sum up being intentional, you start to ask yourself questions. You don't just buy stuff because you have space for it anymore. You understand that you're limited on like where you can put things. So you start asking yourself, well, am I gonna need this or am I just buying it because it's cute? Does it work well with the flow of things, right? Because in the event that you don't have like a divider, right? A lot of times people create dividers in their studios, but let's say you keep it open space, you start to worry that stuff flows correctly, right? Because all of it can be seen at once together, if that makes sense, or at least one after another. Yeah, which also ties into point number 5. It forces the creative out of you, right? If you're like me, I used to really shy away from studios because I'm like, it's just one little square. I don't really do well with decorating. Now I gotta figure out how to make it all make sense. I like for the stuff to be sectioned off for me so I don't have to think about it, right? And so I've had a place very briefly that had like an alcove kind of set up where it was like a dip. It didn't have a door, but it was still like a sectioned off bedroom. And then you have a hallway that led to the kitchen and the living room. That is still very one bedroom like. This particular place I'm living at is a proper studio, and I used to think that I could make it work, but it actually works very well for me, and now I'm quite used to it. I really, really like the way that it feels when I walk in my apartment. Some of you may or may not know, but 2 years ago, in the thick of COVID, I was robbed of every single thing that I owned, right? And so it left me really with nothing, which gave me a blank slate, not complaining. But then again, it forced me to really buy things that I needed versus just replacing everything that was taken from me. And so living in the studio was just the perfect time to do that. And it's really been a really good transition. I can imagine that if I ever get it to the point that I feel like I need more space, I'll make the full like hop over. But for now, it's just me. I have no pets, no another human in here. It's working out just fine. As someone who doesn't think of herself as creative, I've kind of made the place my own. My neighbor came over once and she was like, wow, your place is very warm and welcoming. And in my head, I thought I just did the least, right? But apparently I had learned to be creative in the process. I just didn't realize it. Last but not least, if you're willing to compromise on space, living in a studio may mean getting to live on a better property with better amenities, maybe even a better view, because this is 2022 and living is expensive no matter where you live now, right? Unless like you're in the middle of nowhere, Iowa, or Idaho or something. And even those places I bet have still went up on living expenses, right? And so the myth of like living in a studio to save money, those days are gone, okay? Right where I live, there are 1 bedrooms and there's even, I think, 1 2-bedroom floor plan that's very similar to what I pay for my studio. So keep that in perspective. But because you are getting less space, it may mean a better view once again. So the floor plans that are larger than the studio, but are the same price or less, usually don't have a view, usually are not on the higher floor, things like that. For me, I need to be at the top and I need a good view. So if you're willing to compromise on space, again, just ask yourself, how much space do I really need? You may end up with a better deal that way. Now, what I said about the property, there are houses I could probably buy for what I pay in my studio. But because space is not what I prioritize right now, I'm able to live here and have all the really nice amenities that come along with living here. Does that make sense? So again, weigh your options. I'm from Texas and bigger is better. And I've known, it was ingrained in me. Like I'm just used to having space, especially closet space. When I moved to Vegas, I had to really rewire my mind because closet space is not really a thing here, I've noticed. Even when I lived in a 2,000 square foot loft, my closet space was like this. It was so tiny. I'm like, What are y'all thinking? That I can afford to live here, but I don't have clothes or shoes or bags? What is it? Anyway, rant over. Let's get into the cons, which I'm sure, as you can imagine, are not a lot from my perspective. The first con is if you are an overconsumer, if you shop a lot, if that's just your thing, right? If you need to have 300 pairs of shoes and, 400 shirts and 500 dresses and all of this, if you just need that glam room, for example, it's just not enough space. A studio is not your vibe. Let it go. Like, be honest with yourself, right? For me, I can adapt. And again, because I was stripped of everything I own, it was easy to adapt. I'm not gonna lie and say that I wasn't, once upon a time, not fit for this life, okay? I really did have the 300 pair of shoes. But I'm learning I don't need all of that, right? I've been here for 14 months and I literally have one shoe rack. You guys may have seen it. And that's it. I get by just fine. Again, in the near future, things may change. But for right now, I'm learning I don't need a bunch to be happy or to live well. All right, the second pro is that big spaces tend to become overwhelming after a while. So what it means is, because I've lived in such a tiny space for so long, when I go to like my sister's house or my brother's house, or just a friend's place or anywhere at all, like when I go touring other properties, I'm always like, whoa, what am I gonna do with all of this, right? And it's a mental thing too. It's almost like, people who've been in jail, right? They've been incarcerated for so long, especially if they were like in isolation. It's really tough. Like, you're so used to being like this, right? So then like you have to re-expand your mind into being like this. And that's something I'm still struggling with. I looked at a few properties, I'm sure you guys saw in the vlog, that I considered actually living in, but I ultimately did not go with, for more than just the space. But for sure, the space, as quickly as I get excited about it, I start thinking about all these other things that I talked about in the pros. Like, man, now I gotta furnish more. Now I gotta, So take it with a grain of salt, but it's definitely a thing. You will become accustomed to being in like more of an intimate bubble. And so you'll feel like overexposed in larger spaces. Even like restaurants now, when I go out, it's weird. Stuff just feels large. Hard to explain. All right, number 3 is that you start feeling like you're in a hotel room, especially if you live in a setup where like everything is really like vibey, lofty, clean, modern lines. The hotels are the hallways are indoors. So like everything just feels very like hotel. And so some people don't like that. Some people want that contemporary home vibe, and then when they go off on vacation, then they want to feel like they're in a hotel. But because like studio-wise, everything is literally in that same room, that's typically how most hotel rooms are set up, unless you have like a suite or something like that. So that could get like boring very quickly for people who like to switch stuff up. I guess I could put that in there as kind of like a bonus side note tip. If you like to move things around, it just depends on what your setup is like. My setup right now, a lot of the stuff is very like, what's the word? When you can't be moved, I can't think of the word right now. Stationary, that's the word. So it's like, it's only so much I can do with my space to like, revamp it. If you're a revamper, studios may not be for you, depending again on whether you have pieces that are not movable. And that leads me to the last point. If you are a host, the hostess with the mostest, you enjoy having a bunch of friends over, not one or two, but like a bunch at the same time. A studio also may not be your vibe, just because there ain't no space for it. Like, have we said that enough yet? So that's, something to consider. If that's your lifestyle, this may not be ideal. Although where I currently live, and depending on the property that you choose, there are a lot of like social areas. Like we have 3, I think, kitchen areas where you can set up the grill outside. There's some in like the lobby area. There's another one on the 7th floor. So that is the thing. I know I mentioned earlier about having that feeling of being closed in. The great thing about being able to live in a studio and in a nicer property is that it does come with some amenities like co-working spaces, so individual little offices. So sometimes if I don't feel like working in the house because I've just had too much of my own recycled air, I go out there and I go do that, There's a lounge upstairs just to get some fresh air. Like, so you do have little pockets that you have. Right outside my door, there's a little like extra living room area that you really could just extend into my apartment kind of thing. So that's also for those of you who may have partners or friends that come over often. You know, if you got to get away, there's spaces for you to cool off. So that is, I don't know if that's a pro or con, but that's just a side note. And yeah, that's all I have. Thank you for watching. As usual, I'm not gonna make any promises, but I will say that you'll see my face a lot more in February than you did. Ooh, wow, I meant March. You'll see me a lot more in March than you did in January and February. Fingers crossed. Thank you for watching. I love you, and I will see you on the next one. Bye.